Hello everyone, I'm David. Welcome to today's class. What is a language? The technical definition is that a language is a collection of sounds and symbols that humans use to communicate. But is language more than just a tool? Language exists in the mind of the people who understand it, who share the language as a group. People in different language regions communicate with each other using language throughout their lives. However, if all of the people who speak the language die and no one teaches it to the next generation, the language ceases to exist, becoming a dead language. One may begin to wonder, is language alive? There are two parts to this lesson. Part 1 will explain a history of the English language. Part 2 will talk about modern changes to the English vocabulary. If the English language is alive, let's look at how it was born. English is considered a Germanic language, meaning that the grammar is related to Old German. Let's look at an example of this. Consider the sentence, "This is a dog." In German, it's "Das ist ein Hund." While the vocabulary is different, we can hear that the word order and the flow of the sentences are similar. The German word Hund also sounds similar to the English word hound, which is a synonym for dog. The English language started sometime around the year 500. Two tribes called the Angles and the Saxons brought their own Germanic dialects across the North Sea. They settled in what is now Great Britain. Great Britain is an island separated from the rest of Europe. This geographical feature kept English relatively isolated from other European languages, especially in the early years. However, Latin was often used to communicate between the Anglo-Saxons and the other European settlers. As a result, Germanic words and grammar blended together with Latin vocabulary. This blend of language is now called Old English. Many words in the English language we use today come from Old English. Examples include apple, earth, foot, home, stone, wheel, ice, and many more. Many nouns found in England between the years 500 and 1000 come from this time. While these words may seem perfectly normal, they sound very different today than how they did back then. For example, to say, "I'm sorry," you would say, "Ich besorge." To compare English to a human's life, we can think of Old English as a toddler. Most of what the language knows come from its parents, the Anglo-Saxon Germanic dialect, and Latin. In 1066, an army of Norman soldiers invaded England, led by William the Conqueror. The Norman soldiers were from Normandy, now part of France, and spoke a dialect of Old French. The Normans defeated the Anglo-Saxon king and his army at the Battle of Hastings. After this victory, the Normans took control of the government of England. While there was resistance from the Anglo-Saxons, Norman rule lasted more than 90 years. During Norman rule, they demanded that their language be spoken in the courts, schools, universities, and at gatherings of the ruling class. Over the years, some Normans married with Anglo-Saxons, so many people spoke both Norman and Old English back then. After being ruled by 3 Norman kings, the throne was inherited by the Angevin family. They no longer demanded people to speak the Norman language, although it had been used widely enough to influence English vocabulary permanently. Many words introduced by the Normans remained in common language as synonyms that exist side by side with Latin or Old English words. The resulting blend of language is now known as Middle English. Middle English was spoken in England roughly between the years 1000 to 1500. This period was much like English's middle school years. It slowly picked up new ideas and words while experiencing several changes. However, the structure of society was very rigid, and very few people were literate. One word people continue to use today that comes from Middle English is goodbye. During the time Middle English was spoken, people would say, "God be with ye," but eventually this was shortened to goodbye. Around the end of the 16th century, there was a large shift in the way English was spoken. This shift was caused by William Shakespeare, the most influential person on the English language. Shakespeare was a playwright, which is someone who writes plays. During this time, plays were a common form of entertainment for people of all classes of society. When people saw Shakespeare's plays, they were entertained like never before. It was a revolution in entertainment. The audience was completely entranced by the performance. They became devastated when something tragic happened, and would be overcome with joy to see a positive resolution. For one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare invented a new genre of story, the romantic tragedy. Previous romantic stories always had a happy ending. So throughout the play, the audience laughed and cheered on a young man and young woman from 2 warring families who fell in love at first sight. Toward the end of the play, Juliet creates a plan to fake her own death to escape from the family's conflict and run off with Romeo. However, the messenger she sends to inform Romeo of her plan fails to deliver the message. When Romeo sees Juliet and believes she is dead, he commits suicide because he cannot live without her. When Juliet awakens to see what Romeo has done, she feels the same way and commits suicide as well. The audience was struck with grief. Rather than giving polite applause, people cried out in sadness and horror at the fate of the 2 lovers. Shakespeare had created words that allowed people to experience the emotion of losing a loved one. This play coined the term star-crossed lovers to describe a couple whose relationship is doomed because of outside forces. During this time, people believed that the stars determined one's fate, and therefore Romeo and Juliet's tragic end was their destiny. To quote the text of Romeo and Juliet, "From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life." In Shakespeare's writing, He changed nouns into verbs and verbs into adjectives. He connected words that had never been connected before and created 1,700 new words. Many commonly said phrases in modern times were created by Shakespeare and featured in his plays. Some examples are to break the ice, meaning to get the conversation going when strangers meet. It was all Greek to me, meaning something is completely incomprehensible. All that glitters is not gold, meaning we should look beyond appearances to determine value. After the death of Shakespeare in 1616, ordinary people continued to quote sayings from his plays and speak in the language of their favorite characters. Strangers could break the ice by talking about Shakespearean plays, and if someone used a Shakespearean quote that applied to a situation, everyone would understand the reference. To continue the metaphor, the works of Shakespeare and the following literature that he inspired was like the English language attending high school. The language has become more cultured and intelligent. It also became more effective at telling stories using what it learned. In the 18th and 19th centuries, England became determined to conquer foreign lands. English colonies existed in North America, Asia, and Africa, as well as many islands in the Caribbean, South Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans. A common English phrase used at this time was, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." This means that there were British colonies around the far reaches of the world. At this age of exploration and colonization, more foreign words from a wide variety of countries entered into the English vocabulary. Some examples include the different names for spices, such as ginger and chili pepper. When British explorer James Cook first visited a remote island in Polynesia, he noticed that the locals had marked themselves with ink. The locals informed him this was called a tatau. Cook wrote down the word using English letters and coined the term tattoo. As the practice became very popular with sailors, the word to describe inked skin entered into the English language. Also, new materials needed to be named, such as cashmere, which came from the sheep of Kashmir, India. Cashmere was often used to make pajamas, which was a Persian word for loose, comfortable clothing worn to bed. Rather than creating a new English word, the traders kept the foreign words, which sounded suitably exotic and expensive. The age of colonization could be considered as English's gap year, where they spent some time traveling around the world to new places and learning bits of different languages. One effect of British colonization was that English was spread around as a common language of communication. The laws governing the colonies were written in English, and business contracts were usually written in English as well. Merchant traders also used English as a lingua franca. A lingua franca is a language used to make communication possible between people who do not share a native language. The height of the British Empire was reached around 1922, when it ruled about 1/4 of the world's population. While not all the people living under British rule spoke English, most students were required to learn English in school. This helped promote English as the language of diplomacy between countries and as the language of scientific discovery in the modern world. Modern English can be thought of as a person studying at university. English has become very intelligent and shares ideas more rapidly than ever. The language is growing and changing faster than ever, just like how an individual's perspective and ideas may change during university. Modern English continues to grow with improved technology, new forms of entertainment, and changing culture. Many more new words and phrases in the English language have been coined. With improved printing technology, combined with better education and literacy rates, novels became one of the most popular forms of entertainment in the 20th century. A novel can be carried across long distances and shared among several people. This became an important way to spread ideas and influence the English language. Catch-22 is an example of a word coined by a novel. Due to its popularity, Catch-22 has become a common phrase used in modern culture. The original Catch-22 situation is part of the book's plot. The story takes place in Europe during World War II. The American Air Force are flying dangerous bomber plane missions over their enemy. The doctor says that any pilot who is mentally unfit does not have to fly. However, the catch is that any pilot who is worried about their safety and doesn't want to fly must be normal and not mentally unfit. Therefore, no one can get out of flying the missions because of Catch-22. A Catch-22 is any situation that an individual cannot escape because the rules contradict each other. A common example in modern life is one cannot get a job because they do not have any job experience, so no employer will hire them. But how can they get job experience if they cannot get a job? Another example of a Catch-22 might be found when applying for a bank loan. In order to get a bank loan, you need to have some money to be held as guarantee. But if you have enough money to use as guarantee, then you don't need the money from a bank loan. Therefore, it is impossible to get a bank loan without money, but if you had that money, you wouldn't need a bank loan. To this day, novels continue to be a popular form of entertainment and a way to engage with the English language. However, in the 1930s to the 1950s, a more common form of entertainment in daily life was the radio. Radio has been shown to unify spoken language systems over large areas. A prime example of this is in the western provinces of Canada. Starting in 1936, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, or CBC radio stations, broadcast the most up-to-date news as well as talk shows, music, and sports. In Canada, listening to professional hockey games on the radio was one of the most popular forms of entertainment. The commentator would speak quickly and used expressive language to describe the action for listeners to picture in their mind. As a result of the talented voices on the radio, people across the western provinces all had a very similar accent and manner of speaking. Canada has a very diverse range of languages spoken in large cities, such as Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. However, most people in the Western Canadian provinces speak in a very consistent Canadian English accent, thanks to the CBC. While radio has continued to remain popular as entertainment while driving, in the 1950s and 1960s, television became the standard form of entertainment at home. While Canadians tended to listen to Canadian radio shows, American television channels made their way over to Canada. Canadians fell in love with popular American television shows such as I Love Lucy, Friends, and The Simpsons. This caused Canadian language and culture to partially blend with American language and culture. Similar to the effect of Shakespeare, television shows that are highly entertaining will influence viewers to use the language from the show. Eventually, this will spill over into non-viewers who may not even know the origin of the phrase. When an episode is shocking or extremely funny, the quotes will be referenced in social situations, which eventually becomes part of everyday speech. An example of this is the most popular American sitcom in the 1990s, Seinfeld. This TV show made multiple contributions to American English over the decade. One popular phrase used in the show was yada yada yada. Yada 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 is used when someone is telling a story and wants to skip over the unimportant details. They would say, and yada yada yada. The meaning is similar to the word etc. or the phrase and so on. Since the 1990s, the phrase yada 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 is commonly used by English speakers, even those who never watched the show. Apart from novels, radio, and television, evolving technologies have coined many new words as well. For example, Google it. In the early 1990s, the internet was not very popular with mainstream audiences. This is because the connection was much slower than today, and many people found it difficult to navigate the internet. 2 PhD students solved this problem by creating a new search engine, later became known as Google. As a result of Google's innovation and usefulness, Google quickly became the most popular search engine. In the early days of the company, most people still used the term search or look up when referring to using Google. Slowly, as more people started using the internet, the verb to Google crept into popular culture. On October 15, 2002, in the popular show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Google was used as a verb on national television for the first time. The quote was, "Have you Googled her yet?" The usage of this word slowly gained momentum from being used in movies and television as well as everyday life. In China, the website Baidu is the most popular search engine used and is also the common verb used to describe searching online. 百度一下. Another example of a technology being used as a verb in popular culture is Photoshop. Photoshop is the name of a very popular and powerful image editing software created by Adobe. In the early days of Photoshop, people were easily fooled by digitally manipulated images. If they saw an image of someone committing a crime, people would believe this as proof without considering if the photo was genuine. Saying the image was photoshopped is an effective way to explain how the image was manipulated. This is a key example of how language is a tool used to communicate complex ideas quickly. As time goes on, people use Google and Photoshop to refer to a general action, regardless of the software used. This means that you can say you're going to Google something even if you use Yahoo search. You can also Photoshop an image using any image editing software, like 美图. When the usage of new words, such as Google and Photoshop, become widely accepted as part of the English language, they will be entered into the dictionary. Dictionaries are important records of the scope of the English language. They must be updated on a regular basis to stay accurate and relevant. As a result, different editions of the dictionary can be used to observe how the English language has changed in the past century. To show how a dictionary can keep up with modern language, here are some new additions to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 2017. Humble brag, a seemingly modest statement that is meant to draw attention to one's impressive qualities or achievements. This can be used as a noun or a verb and was created as an effect of people showing off on social media. The term face palm means to cover one's face with the hand as an expression of embarrassment. This term can also be used as a noun or a verb, which was inspired as a description of the popular emoji. And finally, binge watch, which is a verb used when someone watches several episodes of a television series in a row. This is made possible by online video streaming services, such as Netflix. As we can see, the English language is changing faster than ever. Who knows what words will be created in the future? Perhaps someday you can coin a new English word that will enter into the dictionary. The English language is alive in the minds of over 1 billion people, each with a unique point of view. To quickly review, today we talked about the history of the English language and how modern technology has helped to evolve the English language. We compared English to a human's life. It has experienced toddler stage, middle school, high school, and university. Now it's still growing thanks to novels, radio, television, technologies, and social media. We came to the conclusion that English is alive. All right, that's it for today's class. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting. See you next time, everyone. Goodbye.